The evening air carried a crisp autumn chill as Rose hurried up the employee entrance of the Grand Plaza Hotel. She was running 10 minutes late for her shift, which felt like an eternity in the high-pressure world of luxury service. Her bus had broken down halfway through the route, forcing her to wait for the next one while watching the minutes tick by on her worn wristwatch. "I'm so sorry," she whispered to Diane, the head waitress who stood checking the staff schedule by the time clock. "The number 42 bus, just get changed quickly." Diane cut her off with a tired smile. "The Henderson wedding reception is in the main ballroom tonight." "Big money. Big expectations." Rose nodded, hurrying to the staff locker room. She changed into the crisp black uniform with practice speed, her fingers working the buttons while her mind raced through the mental checklist of everything she needed to remember for tonight's event. High-profile guests meant extra attention to detail. It meant perfect posture, invisible service, and absolutely no mistakes. As she pinned her name tag to her lapel, she caught her reflection in the small mirror inside her locker door. Dark circles shadowed her eyes from the late night studying for her business administration class. Her second-hand textbooks waited at home, pages marked with sticky notes for the exam next week. Tonight's tips would help pay for next semester's courses if she was lucky. "Rose, we need you on the floor now." The voice of Mr. Peterson, the event manager, echoed down the hallway. She closed her locker and hurried out, smoothing her hair back into its tight bun as she went. The main ballroom of the Grand Plaza was transformed for the wedding reception. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables dressed in white linen and adorned with towering arrangements of white roses and lilies. A small orchestra was setting up in the corner, and across the room, a magnificent grand piano gleamed under carefully positioned spotlights. Rose felt a familiar tug at her heart at the sight of the piano. It had been there for every event she'd worked during her 3 years at the hotel, but she never got used to seeing it. Never stopped feeling that pull. "You're on section 3 tonight," Diane said, handing Rose a serving tray. "Tables 16 through 22. The father of the bride is at 18. He's the one paying, so extra attention there." "Got it," Rose said, straightening her shoulders and adopting the pleasant but neutral expression that was expected of staff. Guests began arriving shortly after, dressed in designer gowns and tailored suits that cost more than Rose's yearly rent. She moved between her assigned tables with practiced efficiency, filling water glasses and describing the premium champagne options with the rehearsed script all servers used. "We're offering the Dom Perignon, 2008 or the Cru Grand Cuvée for toasts this evening," she explained, to a table of well-dressed older women, careful to maintain eye contact without seeming too familiar. "The Krug for our table," a woman with a diamond necklace said without looking up from her conversation. Rose nodded and moved on, weaving between tables with the graceful, almost invisible movements she had perfected over years of service work. As she worked, the orchestra began to play, soft classical music forming a backdrop to the cheerful conversation filling the room. During a brief moment between drink orders, Rose's eyes drifted again to the piano. The hotel had hired a pianist for later in the evening, but for now it sat untouched, its polished surface reflecting the chandelier light like a mirror. "Admiring the Steinway?" a voice asked beside her. Rose turned to find Mr. Chen, the elderly maintenance supervisor who had worked at the hotel for over 30 years. He was collecting an empty tray from a service station nearby. "It's beautiful," she admitted, keeping her voice low so guests wouldn't hear staff chatting. "Is it new?" Mr. Chen shook his head. "Been here longer than I have. They say it once belonged to a famous concert pianist who stayed here in the 1960s and couldn't pay his bill after gambling away his fortune downstairs. The hotel owner at the time took the piano as payment." He smiled at her. "Do you play?" Before Rose could answer, a guest at table 20 signaled for service, and she hurried away with a polite nod to Mr. Chen. The question lingered in her mind, though, as she took orders for more champagne. Did she still play? It had been so long. The evening progressed into dinner service, Rose moving with increasing speed as the reception hit its stride. The bride and groom had their first dance, the orchestra playing a romantic ballad that made several guests dab at their eyes with monogrammed handkerchiefs. Speeches followed, with the father of the bride rising at table 18 to thank everyone for coming with a voice thick with emotion and expensive scotch. It was nearly midnight when the party began winding down. Many of the older guests had already departed, leaving the younger friends of the couple to continue celebrating on the dance floor. The orchestra took a break and recorded music played through the sound system while the musicians rested. Rose's feet ached as she cleared dessert plates from her tables. Most of her section had emptied, with only a few lingerers finishing their coffee and after-dinner drinks. Mr. Peterson had already told half the waitstaff they could go home, but Rose was scheduled until closing. "You can take your break now if you want," Diane told her, passing by with a tray of dirty glasses. 20 minutes. "The night crew will be here soon for teardown." Grateful, Rose nodded and slipped out of the ballroom. Usually she would head to the staff room to rest her feet and check her phone for messages from her roommate, but tonight she felt too restless. Instead, she found herself wandering back into the ballroom through a side entrance, where the remaining guests wouldn't notice her. The dance floor was now empty, with the last few guests clustered around the bar that had been set up in the corner opposite the piano. The pianist hired for the evening had finished his set and packed up his sheet music hours ago. Rose glanced around to make sure no managers were watching, then slowly approached the piano. It was against hotel policy for staff to touch the instruments, but something about tonight made her bold. Perhaps it was the fatigue breaking down her usual caution, or the memory of Mr. Chen's question still echoing in her mind. "Do you play?" Once she had, before her father lost his job and sold the upright piano that had been her childhood companion. Before music lessons became an unaffordable luxury. Before life had become an endless cycle of work and study with little room for anything else. Rose slid onto the bench, not quite touching the keys, just feeling the smooth wood beneath her fingertips. The ballroom was dim now, with many of the lights turned low as the event came to its close. No one was paying attention to a waitress sitting at a piano she wasn't supposed to touch. She pressed one key, so softly it made almost no sound, then another. The muscle memory was still there, buried beneath years of disuse. Her fingers remembered where to go. Before she knew what she was doing, Rose was playing. Softly at first, a simple melody her grandmother had taught her when she was just 6 years old. Her hands remembered finding the notes without conscious thought. The piece was a lullaby, gentle and sweet. Nothing fancy or technical, but it was music and it was hers. She closed her eyes, letting herself get lost in the feeling of creating sound again after so long. She transitioned into another piece she remembered, something classical she had learned for a recital when she was 12. Her technique was rusty and she missed notes here and there, but it didn't matter. For those few minutes, she wasn't a waitress with aching feet and unpaid bills. She was just Rose playing the piano because it made her heart feel full. When she finished the piece, she let her hands rest on the keys, not quite ready to break the spell. Then she heard it, the sound of a single person clapping slowly and deliberately. Rose's eyes snapped open and she jumped to her feet, her heart pounding. Standing a few feet away was an older man in an expensive suit, the father of the bride from table 18. How long had he been listening? "I'm so sorry, sir," she stammered, smoothing her uniform with trembling hands. "I know I shouldn't have." "Please," he said, holding up his hand. "Don't apologize for that. Where did you learn to play like that?" Rose hesitated, unsure how to respond. Would she get in trouble? Would Mr. Peterson fire her if he found out she'd been touching the piano? "My grandmother taught me when I was little," she finally said, "and I took lessons for a while. It's been years, though." The man nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Years? That makes what I just heard even more remarkable." He extended his hand. "I'm Howard Bennett." "And you are?" "Rose," she replied, reluctantly shaking his hand. "Rose Torres." "Well, Rose Torres," he said with a small smile, "you have a gift, and I have a proposition for you. But first, can you play something else for me?" Rose glanced nervously toward the bar where the remaining guests were gathering their things, preparing to leave. No managers were in sight, just one more, Howard said, noticing her hesitation. "Please." She shouldn't. She really shouldn't. But something in the man's expression made her sit back down at the piano bench. Taking a deep breath, Rose placed her fingers on the keys and began to play again. Rose's fingers moved across the piano keys with growing confidence, playing a piece she had loved as a teenager, a cover of a popular song she had taught herself by ear. The melody flowed through her like a forgotten friend returning after a long absence. She wasn't perfect. Her tempo wavered in places where her memory failed her, but the emotion in her playing was undeniable. When she finished, Howard Bennett was silent for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Remarkable, he finally said. Truly remarkable. And you say you haven't played in years? Rose shook her head, suddenly aware that her break time was nearly up. Not since high school. I should really get back to work, Mr. Bennett. Wait, Howard said, reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out a business card. I'm on the board of the Children's Music Foundation. We're having our annual fundraising gala next Saturday night at this very hotel. He handed her the card. It's our biggest event of the year, raising money for music education in underfunded schools. Rose took the card hesitantly, reading the embossed letters. Howard Bennett, Executive Board Member, Children's Music Foundation. What does this have to do with me? She asked, tucking the card into her uniform pocket. Howard smiled. I'd like you to play at the gala. Rose's eyes widened. Play? At your gala? Sir, I'm just a waitress. I'm not a performer. What I just heard says otherwise, Howard replied. The foundation is all about discovering hidden talent and making music accessible to everyone. Having someone like you perform, someone with natural talent who didn't have the opportunity to pursue it professionally, it would be the perfect embodiment of our mission. Rose felt her cheeks flush. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Bennett, but I couldn't possibly. Rose. Break's over. Mr. Peterson's sharp voice cut through their conversation as he appeared at the ballroom entrance. Think about it, Howard said quickly. My number's on the card. And I pay well for performers. Rose nodded hurriedly and rushed away, her mind spinning with the unexpected encounter as she returned to her duties. The next morning, Rose woke up in her small apartment with the memory of Howard's offer still fresh in her mind. Sunlight streamed through the thin curtains as she made coffee in the tiny kitchen she shared with her roommate. Tina, you look like you didn't sleep at all, Tina observed, emerging from her bedroom in nursing scrubs, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Rough shift. Strange shift, Rose corrected, passing Tina a mug of coffee. She pulled Howard's business card from her uniform pocket where she'd left it and placed it on the counter between them. This guy heard me playing the piano last night and wants me to perform at some fancy charity event. Tina's eyebrows shot up as she picked up the card. Howard Bennett? The real estate developer? Rose, he's loaded. His company owns half the high-rises downtown. Really? Rose hadn't recognized the name. Yeah, and his wife runs that big foundation for kids' music programs. They're in the society pages all the time. Tina handed the card back. So what did you tell him? Nothing yet. Mr. Peterson showed up and I had to get back to work. Rose sipped her coffee. But I can't do it anyway. I'm scheduled to work that night. Tina rolled her eyes. So ask for the night off. This could be an opportunity. To what? Make a fool of myself in front of rich people? Rose shook her head. I haven't seriously played in years, Tina, and I never had formal training past age 13. But he heard you play and still asked you, Tina pointed out. Must mean you're better than you think. She glanced at the clock and grabbed her bag. Gotta run. Late shift at the hospital. But Rose, she paused at the door and called him. What's the worst that could happen? After Tina left, Rose sat at their small kitchen table, turning the business card over in her hands. What was the worst that could happen? She could embarrass herself in front of wealthy donors. She could get fired for moonlighting. She could fail miserably, but then again, what if she didn't? With a deep breath, Rose picked up her phone and dialed the number on the card. To her surprise, Howard answered himself rather than an assistant. Mr. Bennett, this is Rose Torres. From the wedding last night, the pianist, he replied warmly. I'm glad you called. About your offer. Rose hesitated. I'm actually scheduled to work that night. Leave that to me, Howard said confidently. I know the hotel manager quite well. Now, would you be willing to play 3 or 4 pieces? We'd need you for about 30 minutes during dinner. Rose felt her heart racing. I'd need to practice. I don't have a piano. The hotel has agreed to let you use the ballroom piano during off hours this week. I've already spoken to them about it. Rose blinked in surprise. You have? I'm a decisive man, Rose. When I see talent, I act quickly. There was a smile in his voice. The gala is a week from Saturday. We pay performers $2,000 for the evening. Plus, you'll be our guest for dinner before your set. Does that work for you? Rose nearly dropped the phone. $2,000 was almost 2 months' rent. Yes, she heard herself say. Yes, that would work. Excellent. My assistant will email you the details. The dress code is formal. Do you have something suitable to wear? Rose thought of her one black dress purchased for a job interview 3 years ago. I'll figure something out. Perfect. I look forward to hearing you play again, Rose. I have a feeling you're going to surprise a lot of people, including yourself. After hanging up, Rose sat motionless at the kitchen table, wondering what she had just agreed to. She had a week to prepare a performance for a room full of wealthy donors, a week to become something she hadn't been in years, a pianist. That afternoon, Rose arrived at the Grand Plaza 2 hours before her scheduled shift. She had received an email from Howard's assistant confirming that the hotel management had approved her use of the ballroom piano for practice. "Mr. Peterson wants to see you in his office," Diane told her when she arrived. There was an odd expression on her face that made Rose's stomach clench with anxiety. She knocked tentatively on the office door. "Come in," Mr. Peterson called. When Rose entered, she was surprised to find him smiling. "Ah, Rose, sit down, please." Rose perched nervously on the edge of the chair across from his desk. "It seems you've made quite an impression on Howard Bennett," Mr. Peterson said, leaning back in his chair. "He called me personally this morning." "I'm sorry if there was any confusion," Rose began. "I didn't mean to—" Mr. Peterson waved away her apology. "No need for that. Mr. Bennett is one of our most valued clients, and he was quite insistent that we accommodate you." He leaned forward. "Why didn't you ever mention you were a pianist?" "I'm not really," Rose said. "I mean, I used to play, but it's been a long time." "Well, Mr. Bennett seems to think otherwise, and he's arranged for you to have access to the ballroom piano whenever it's not in use this week." Mr. Peterson consulted a schedule on his desk. "We've blocked off 2 hours each morning before events, and Mr. Chen will let you in. As for the gala itself, you're officially off the serving schedule that night." "Thank you," Rose said, relief washing over her. "I really appreciate it." "Don't thank me," Mr. Peterson replied. "Thank Mr. Bennett. Oh, and Rose?" He gave her a pointed look. "Don't make me regret this special treatment." For the next week, Rose's life fell into a new rhythm. Early mornings at the piano in the empty ballroom, regular shifts serving guests, late nights selecting and practicing pieces she thought would work for the gala. She chose a mix of classical pieces she remembered from her lessons and popular songs she had taught herself, arranged in a way that she hoped would appeal to the foundation's donors. With each practice session, her confidence grew. Her fingers became more nimble, her timing more precise. Mr. Chen often sat in the back of the ballroom, listening as he pretended to check light fixtures or adjust thermostats. "You play from the heart," he told her one morning as she was finishing her practice time. "That's something no amount of lessons can teach." The day before the gala, a package arrived for Rose at the hotel. Inside was a note from Howard's wife, Elaine Bennett. "Every pianist needs a proper performance dress. We look forward to your music tomorrow night." Beneath the note was a stunning midnight blue gown with a modest neckline and flowing skirt. Rose held it up with trembling hands. It looked exactly her size. That night, Rose barely slept. She ran through the pieces in her mind, imagining her fingers on the keys, hearing the music in her head. By morning, she was exhausted but too wired to feel it. Tina helped her with her hair and makeup before leaving for her hospital shift. "You're going to be amazing," she assured Rose. "Text me how it goes. I want all the details." As Rose put on the blue dress and looked at herself in the mirror, she hardly recognized the woman staring back at her. Gone was the waitress in a plain black uniform. In her place stood someone else, someone who looked like she belonged on a stage. She arrived at the hotel early, slipping in through the staff entrance out of habit. The ballroom had been transformed for the gala with twinkling lights and elaborate centerpieces featuring miniature musical instruments. The piano waited on a small stage that hadn't been there before, illuminated by a single spotlight. "There you are." Elaine Bennett approached, elegant in a red gown. She was a slender woman with silver-streaked dark hair and kind eyes. "The dress fits perfectly, I'm so glad." "Thank you for your generosity," Rose said. "It's beautiful." "Howard told me about finding you playing after the wedding," Elaine said, taking Rose's arm and guiding her toward the back of the ballroom. "He said it was like witnessing something magical." "I can't wait to hear you myself." As they walked, Elaine explained the evening's schedule. Guests would arrive at 6, dinner would be served at 7, and Rose would perform at 8, right before Howard's speech about the foundation. "We have over 200 donors tonight," Elaine added, including several music industry professionals. "Howard's quite excited about that. Rose felt her mouth go dry. 200 people? Music professionals? What had she gotten herself into? As if sensing her panic, Elaine squeezed her arm gently. You'll be wonderful. Howard has excellent taste in music and he believes in you completely. She smiled. Now come meet the other performers. We have a string quartet playing during the cocktail hour. As Rose followed Elaine toward the green room set up for performers, she caught sight of herself reflected in one of the ballroom's mirrored walls. A young woman in a blue gown, standing tall despite her fear, about to face the biggest night of her life. The green room buzzed with activity as Rose was introduced to the other performers, 4 young musicians in formal attire who made up the string quartet. They were all music students from the local university, and they greeted Rose with warm smiles and encouragement. First time performing at the gala? Asked a young man with a violin case propped against his chair. Rose nodded, her throat too dry to speak. Don't worry about the crowd, advised a cellist with kind eyes. Just focus on the music. Once you start playing, you'll forget anyone's watching. Rose wished she could believe that. Through the open door, she could hear the ballroom filling with guests, the rising murmur of voices, the clinking of glasses. Servers in the same black uniform she usually wore moved efficiently among the crowd with trays of champagne and appetizers. 15 minutes until we start, the quartet's first violinist announced, checking her watch. Rose excused herself to find a quiet corner. Her hands were trembling slightly and she flexed her fingers, trying to calm her nerves. She had practiced for hours this week, but suddenly all the music seemed to have evaporated from her mind. There you are. Howard appeared in the doorway, distinguished in his tuxedo. Everything all right? Just nervous, Rose admitted. I've never played for an audience before. Not a real one. Howard nodded understandingly. The first time I gave a speech at a charity event, I was so nervous I nearly passed out. But you know what helped? He leaned in conspiratorially. I reminded myself why I was doing it. Not for myself, but for the kids who needed the foundation's help. Rose took a deep breath. The kids, exactly, Howard said. Tonight isn't about impressing wealthy donors. It's about showing them why music education matters, what it can do for a young person with talent. He smiled at her, just like it did for you. His words shifted something inside Rose. She hadn't thought of it that way before. Her playing tonight could help make sure other kids had opportunities she never had. I should check on some things, Howard said, glancing at his watch. You'll be wonderful, Rose, I know it. After he left, Rose felt calmer. She closed her eyes and ran through her pieces mentally one more time, her fingers moving slightly in her lap as if playing an invisible piano. Time seemed to both crawl and fly. Before she knew it, the quartet had finished their set and returned to the green room, flushed with success and chattering excitedly. Elaine appeared at the door. Rose? We're ready for you. Rose stood smoothing the blue dress with damp palms. As she followed Elaine through a side entrance to the ballroom, she kept her eyes down, not yet ready to face the crowd. She could feel the weight of conversations pausing, of heads turning as she walked toward the piano. The spotlight felt warm on her skin as she took her seat at the bench. Only then did she look up and immediately wish she hadn't. The ballroom was packed with people in evening wear, their faces turned expectantly toward her. Round tables filled the space, each adorned with centerpieces that caught the light. At the table nearest the piano sat Howard and Elaine, along with several people Rose didn't recognize. Rose's heart hammered in her chest. She placed her hands on the keys and found them ice cold. For a terrifying moment, she couldn't remember a single note of what she had planned to play. Then she saw Mr. Chen standing near the back wall, arms crossed, giving her an encouraging nod. Beside him was Diane, who had come in on her night off to support Rose. And there was Mr. Peterson, watching with curious eyes to see if his special treatment had been justified. Rose closed her eyes briefly. She thought of her grandmother who had first placed her small hands on piano keys, of the teacher who had volunteered free lessons when her family could no longer afford them, of all the children who might benefit from what she was about to do. She began to play. The first notes were hesitant, slightly uneven as her nervousness translated through her fingers. She had chosen to start with a classical piece, one that built slowly from a simple melody to a more complex arrangement. As the familiar pattern of notes flowed from her fingers, Rose felt her anxiety begin to recede, replaced by concentration. By the middle of the piece, She had forgotten about the audience. She was lost in the music, in the feeling of creating something beautiful after so many years of simply getting by. When she finished the piece, there was a moment of silence before applause broke out, startling her back to awareness. Rose moved into her second piece with growing confidence, a contemporary song everyone would recognize, but arranged to showcase the piano. She heard a few murmurs of recognition from the crowd as people identified the familiar melody. Some were nodding along, smiling at the unexpected choice. For her third piece, Rose had chosen something more challenging, a jazz standard that allowed for some improvisation. This had been the riskiest choice, the one she had practiced most diligently, because it required her to move beyond the notes she had memorized and truly create in the moment. As she played, adding flourishes and variations that came to her instinctively, Rose felt something she hadn't experienced in years, pure joy. The kind that came from doing exactly what you were meant to do. Her body swayed slightly with the rhythm, her face relaxed into a small smile. She was no longer playing for the audience or even for the foundation. She was playing for herself, rediscovering a part of her she had buried long ago. When the final notes of the piece faded away, there was a beat of silence before the room erupted in enthusiastic applause. Rose looked up to see people rising to their feet, their faces alight with appreciation. Howard was beaming, clapping vigorously, while Elaine wiped a tear from her eye. Rose stood somewhat dazed and bowed as she had seen performers do. The applause continued, washing over her in waves. She caught sight of Mr. Peterson at the back of the room, looking surprisingly impressed. Howard approached the piano, taking the microphone from its stand. "Ladies and gentlemen, Rose Torres," he announced, generating another round of applause. Wasn't that remarkable? Rose began to move away, assuming her part was done, but Howard gently caught her arm. "A moment, please," he said quietly before turning back to the microphone. "What you just witnessed," Howard told the crowd, "is exactly why the Children's Music Foundation exists." Rose began playing piano as a child but lost access to both an instrument and lessons when her family faced financial hardship. He looked at Rose. "Is that right?" Rose nodded, uncomfortable at suddenly becoming the subject of Howard's speech but understanding what he was doing. "Imagine how many children like Rose are out there right now," Howard continued. "Young people with extraordinary gifts that remain undiscovered because they lack access to instruments, to lessons, to mentors who can nurture their talents." He gestured to Rose. "Without the foundation's work, gifts like Rose's might never be shared with the world." The crowd was silent now, attentive to Howard's words. Rose stood awkwardly beside him, unsure where to look. "Tonight," Howard said, "your generosity will ensure that more children discover the joy of making music, regardless of their circumstances. And someday, some of those children will create beauty like what we just experienced." He smiled at Rose. "Thank you, Rose, for reminding us all why this work matters." More applause followed as Rose finally was able to make her exit, her cheeks burning from the attention. As she reached the side door leading back to the green room, a tall man in an impeccably tailored suit stepped in front of her. "Ms. Torres, I'm Richard Landry," he said, extending his hand. "I'm the program director at the Westside Community Music School. Do you have a moment?" "Of course," Rose replied, still feeling somewhat dazed. "We're always looking for piano instructors for our weekend program," Richard said. "After what I just heard, I'd like to offer you a position. The pay isn't extraordinary, but it includes free access to our practice rooms and recording studio." Rose blinked at him. "You want me to teach?" "But I don't have any qualifications," Richard smiled. "You have the most important qualification. You can play with both skill and heart. The technical aspects of teaching can be learned." He handed her a business card. "Think about it. We work with many of the children the foundation supports." As Richard walked away, he approached, linking her arm through Rose's. "Come on," she said warmly. "There are some people you should meet." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and congratulations. A composer wanted to know if Rose had ever considered writing her own music. A music therapist asked if she'd be interested in volunteering at the Children's Hospital. Howard introduced her to donors who shared stories of their own musical journeys. By the time the gala ended, Rose had a small stack of business cards and a head spinning with possibilities. As guests began to depart, she found a quiet moment to slip away to the now empty green room. She sat on one of the plush chairs, still in her blue gown, trying to process everything that had happened. A soft knock on the doorframe caught her attention. Mr. Chen stood there, smiling proudly. "You played beautifully," he said simply. "Thank you," Rose replied, "for listening to me practice all week. For believing I could do this." Mr. Chen shook his head. "I just provided the space. You did the rest." He hesitated, then added, "My daughter manages a small music store downtown. They have a few pianos. Perhaps you could come play sometimes when customers are shopping. It might help sell a few instruments." Rose smiled at the kind offer. "I'd like that." As Mr. Chen left, Rose looked down at the business cards in her lap. Teacher, performer, composer. Roles she had never imagined for herself just 1 week ago. She picked up her phone to text Tina, knowing her roommate would be eagerly awaiting news. But how could she possibly explain what had happened tonight? How could she capture the feeling of rediscovering a part of herself she thought was lost forever? Rose typed a simple message. Everything has changed. The morning after the gala, Rose woke up earlier than usual. For a few moments she lay still, wondering if the previous night had been a dream. The memory of sitting at that grand piano, of losing herself in the music while hundreds of people watched, seemed too surreal to be true. But then she noticed the blue gown hanging on her closet door and the stack of business cards on her nightstand. It had happened. All of it. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tina. "Tell me everything when I get home from my shift." Rose smiled, still trying to process it all herself. She'd stayed up late telling Tina the basics, that she'd played, that people had liked it, that she'd received some offers. But she hadn't been able to articulate the feeling of that night, the sense that something fundamental had shifted inside her. She made coffee and sat by the apartment's small window, watching the city wake up. Today was her day off from the hotel, a rare Saturday without responsibilities. Usually she spent these precious free days catching up on laundry, grocery shopping, or studying. Today felt different, like the start of something new. After showering, Rose found herself drawn to the stack of business cards. She sorted through them slowly, remembering each conversation. The music school director who'd offered her a teaching position. The hospital music therapist. The composer who'd seemed genuinely impressed by her playing. And Mr. Chen's daughter with the music store downtown. One card in particular caught her eye. A simple cream-colored rectangle with elegant black lettering. Victor Novak. Talent management. She remembered the man who'd given it to her, a quiet, thoughtful person who'd waited until the crowd around her had thinned before approaching. "I don't represent many pianists," he'd told her, "but I'd like to talk about your potential. No pressure. Just a conversation." Rose had been so overwhelmed at that point that she'd simply thanked him and added his card to her growing collection. Now in the clear light of morning, his offer seemed both exciting and intimidating. A talent manager, for her? Her phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. "An unfamiliar number, hello?" she answered hesitantly. "Rose? This is Elaine Bennett, the warm voice from last night. I hope I'm not calling too early." "No, not at all," Rose said, surprised to hear from Howard's wife so soon. "Thank you again for the dress. I'll get it dry cleaned and..." "Keep it," Elaine interrupted gently. "It was made for you. Besides, you'll need it again." "I will? That's why I'm calling. The response to your performance last night was overwhelming. Several of our major donors have specifically asked if you would play at their events." Rose sat down slowly. "Their events?" "Private functions, charity galas, that sort of thing. Paid engagements, of course. Howard and I thought it might be easier if we helped coordinate these requests, but we wanted to check with you first." Rose's mind raced. More performances? More opportunities to play? "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Elaine suggested with a smile in her voice. "Starting with lunch today? Howard and I would love to discuss the possibilities. There's a small cafe near your apartment, the Bluebird. Could you meet us there at noon?" After agreeing to lunch, Rose sat in stunned silence for several minutes. Yesterday, she'd been a waitress who occasionally played piano when no one was watching. Today, she was fielding offers for paid performances. She glanced at the clock. 9:30 a.m. With time to spare before meeting the Bennetts, Rose decided to follow up on another opportunity. She dialed the number on Mr. Chen's daughter's card. "Harmony Music Shop, this is Lynn speaking." "Hi, Lynn. My name is Rose Torres. Your father suggested I call you? I played piano at the Foundation Gala last night, and he mentioned you might be interested in having someone play at your store. Rose. Yes, my father texted me about you last night. He was very impressed, and he's not easily impressed. Lynn's voice was friendly and direct. We have a baby grand near the front window that customers can try out, but it would be wonderful to have someone actually play it properly. Would you be available to come in sometime this week for a chat? Maybe try out the piano? By the time Rose left for her lunch with the Bennetts, she had scheduled a visit to the music shop for Monday afternoon and left a message for Richard Landry at the community music school about the teaching position. She felt both exhilarated and overwhelmed by how quickly things were moving. The Bluebird Cafe was a charming spot with outdoor tables shaded by blue umbrellas. Rose spotted the Bennetts immediately, looking relaxed in casual weekend clothes rather than formal wear. There she is, our star pianist, Howard said warmly as Rose approached. He stood to pull out a chair for her. We've already ordered some appetizers to share. Thank you for meeting us, Elaine added. We thought you might have questions about what happens next. Rose nodded, grateful for their guidance. Everything's happening so fast. Last night after my performance, so many people gave me their cards, including Victor Novak, Howard noted with raised eyebrows. He's selective about who he represents. You know him? Rose asked. We've worked with him for foundation events, Elaine explained. He has an excellent reputation. If he's interested in representing you, that could be a good path forward. They spent the next hour discussing possibilities. The Bennetts had already received requests for Rose to perform at 3 upcoming charity functions, each paying a substantial fee. Howard advised her to consider investing in a proper performance wardrobe and professional headshots if she wanted to pursue these opportunities seriously. What about your job at the hotel? Elaine asked gently. Rose hesitated. I don't know. I need steady income for rent, for school. School? Howard inquired. I'm taking business administration classes, Rose explained. Part-time at the community college. Howard and Elaine exchanged glances. May I ask why? Howard said. Business administration seems a far cry from music. Rose shrugged. It's practical, stable. Before last night, I never thought music could be a real career option for me. And now? Elaine prompted. Now? I'm not sure. Everything's changing so quickly. After lunch, the Bennetts drove Rose to a nearby park where a small outdoor concert was taking place, a jazz trio playing for a casual weekend crowd. They found a bench and listened for a while, the conversation turning to Rose's background and her interrupted musical education. The foundation has a scholarship program, Howard mentioned, as they walked back to the parking lot. For promising musicians of any age, something to consider. By the time Rose returned home, her mind was buzzing with possibilities. Tina was already there, eager to hear every detail of the previous night and the lunch meeting. You should call that talent manager right now, Tina insisted after Rose had filled her in. Strike while the iron is hot. Rose hesitated, feeling suddenly out of her depth. What would I even say to him? Hi, I'm a waitress who played piano at one event, and now I think I'm a professional musician. Yes, exactly that, Tina said firmly. Own it, Rose, you are a musician. You always have been, even when you were serving drinks and taking orders. With Tina's encouragement, Rose finally made the call to Victor Novak, who answered on the second ring. Ms. Torres, I was hoping to hear from you, he said. His voice was calm and thoughtful, matching Rose's memory of him from the gala. I've had several calls about you today. You have? Rose was startled. The musical community in this city is smaller than you might think, and good news travels fast. There was a smile in his voice. I understand the Bennetts are already lining up performances for you. Yes, they've been incredibly supportive, Rose confirmed. They're good people, Victor agreed. I've worked with them for years. Listen, I'd like to meet with you properly this week, by office or somewhere you're comfortable. We should discuss what you want from your music, where you see yourself going with it. They arranged to meet on Tuesday afternoon at a coffee shop near the hotel. After hanging up, Rose sat in silence for a long moment, trying to process how much her life had changed in just 24 hours. Earth to Rose. Tina waved a hand in front of her face. What did he say? We're meeting Tuesday, Rose replied, still somewhat dazed. He asked what I want for my music, where I see myself going with it. And? Tina prompted. What do you want? It was a question Rose hadn't allowed herself to consider in years, what she wanted rather than what was practical or necessary. The weight of rent payments, utility bills, tuition fees, and daily survival had crushed those kinds of dreams long ago. "I don't know yet," she admitted, "but I think I want to find out." The weekend flew by in a blur of phone calls, messages, and research. Rose spent hours online, looking up everything from music theory refresher courses to the careers of pianists who had started late. She practiced finger exercises on their kitchen counter, her muscles remembering patterns she thought she'd forgotten. By Monday morning, she had made a decision. She called Mr. Peterson at the hotel. "I'd like to reduce my hours," she told him, heart pounding as she took this leap. "I've been offered some other opportunities that I want to pursue." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Does this have to do with your performance the other night?" "Yes," Rose admitted. "I've been asked to play at other events, and there's a music store that wants me to demonstrate their pianos. Also a community school that needs teachers." Another pause. Then, to her surprise, Mr. Peterson chuckled. "Well, I can't say I'm shocked. You were impressive. How about this? We'll put you on the weekend event schedule only. Prime shifts, better tips. You keep your foot in the door here while you explore these other avenues." Relief washed over Rose. It wasn't as risky as quitting outright, but it was a step towards something new. "Thank you. I really appreciate that. Just remember us when you're famous," Mr. Peterson said dryly before hanging up. That afternoon, Rose visited Harmony Music Shop, where Lin Chen welcomed her warmly and showed her the baby grand piano in the front window. It was smaller than the hotel's grand piano, but beautifully maintained. "Play something," Lin encouraged. "Whatever you like." Rose sat down, adjusting the bench and taking a moment to feel the keys beneath her fingers. Then she began to play one of the pieces from the gala, losing herself in the music just as she had that night. When she finished, she looked up to find a small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk outside the shop window, watching her through the glass. Inside, customers had paused their browsing to listen. Lin was beaming. "How would you feel about playing here 2 afternoons a week? We can work around your schedule, and the pay is decent." By the time Rose left the music shop with a formal job offer, she felt as though she was walking on air. Her phone buzzed with a text from Howard Bennett. "Just confirmed another performance request for you. Black tie dinner next month. Good fee. Interested?" Rose typed back immediately. "Yes, thank you." She paused on the sidewalk, looking up at the clear blue sky. 1 week ago, she had been a waitress with a hidden talent and fading dreams. Today, she was a pianist with opportunities unfolding before her like sheet music, waiting to be played. Her phone buzzed again. "Richard Landry from the music school. Looking forward to meeting tomorrow about teaching position. Bring any music you'd like to play for our students." Rose smiled, thinking of all the pieces she had loved as a child, all the songs that had stayed with her through the years when she couldn't play them. Now she could share that music with others who might not otherwise have the chance to learn. "Everything has changed," she had texted Tina after the gala. Now she understood just how true those words were. The future was unwritten, full of possibilities she had never dared to imagine, and she couldn't wait to discover what came next. 6 months had passed since the night Rose played piano at the Children's Music Foundation Gala. 6 months of transformation that sometimes felt like a dream. Rose stood backstage at the Grand Plaza Hotel, the same hotel where she had once carried trays of champagne and taken drink orders. Tonight she wasn't here as a waitress, but as the featured performer for the foundation's winter fundraiser. 5 minutes. "Ms. Torres," the event coordinator told her with a respectful nod. "Ms. Torres." She still wasn't used to being addressed that way, with deference rather than the casual familiarity people used with service workers. So much had changed. Rose smoothed down her new dress, a deep green gown she had purchased herself from her earnings as a pianist. In the past 6 months, she had played at 12 private events, each one leading to more connections, more opportunities. What had started as a single performance had blossomed into a new career she never could have imagined. Nervous? Howard Bennett appeared beside her, distinguished as always in his tuxedo. Rose smiled at the man who had become both mentor and friend. "A little. It's different playing here. Last time I was in this ballroom, I was carrying dirty plates back to the kitchen." Howard chuckled. "And now you're our headliner. The circle completes itself." Rose peeked through the curtain at the crowded ballroom. Many of the faces were familiar now. donors and music lovers she had met at various events around the city. But tonight was special. Tonight was about giving back. "I see Tina found her seat," Howard commented, following her gaze to where Rose's roommate sat at a front table, looking slightly out of place but proudly wearing her best dress. Beside her was Mr. Chen, who had become one of Rose's biggest supporters, attending nearly every public performance she gave. At another table sat Lynn from the music shop, along with several of Rose's young piano students from the community music school. "They all came," Rose said softly. "Of course they did. They wouldn't miss it." Howard checked his watch. "I should go introduce you. Remember, just like we practiced." As Howard walked onto the stage to address the crowd, Rose took a deep breath, centering herself. The past 6 months flashed through her mind, a whirlwind of changes that had reshaped her life completely. She thought of her meeting with Victor Novak, who had indeed become her manager, guiding her through the unfamiliar world of professional music with patience and wisdom. He had helped her navigate performance contracts, negotiate fair fees, and build a reputation as a rising talent in the city's music scene. She thought of her first day teaching at the West Side Community Music School, terrified that she didn't have enough knowledge to share, only to discover that her own interrupted musical journey made her especially understanding of the challenges her students faced. Now she had 8 regular students, ranging from a 5-year-old just starting out to a 70-year-old retiree fulfilling a lifelong dream. She thought of the day she had finally, tearfully, submitted withdrawal paperwork for her business administration classes, choosing instead to enroll in music theory and composition courses at the City College's arts program. The foundation scholarship Howard had mentioned had made it possible, covering her tuition and providing a small stipend. And now, Howard's voice broke through her reflections. "It's my great pleasure to introduce our featured performer tonight. A remarkable young woman who reminds us all of the transformative power of music. Please welcome Rose Torres." The applause carried Rose onto the stage. She smiled at the crowd, no longer paralyzed by nerves as she had been that first night. She had found her confidence over months of performances, had learned to channel her anxiety into the music instead of letting it control her. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she said into the microphone, her voice steady. "This evening is special to me for many reasons. 6 months ago I stood on this very stage terrified and uncertain. I was a waitress who played piano in secret, never imagining music could be more than a private joy." She looked out at the friendly faces watching her. "Thanks to the Children's Music Foundation and so many of you in this room, I discovered that it could be much more. Tonight I'm honored to give back in my own small way." Rose moved to the piano and sat down, adjusting the bench just so. "The first piece I'll play is one I've composed myself, inspired by this journey. It's called Hidden Notes." Her fingers found the keys and the music began to flow. Her own creation, a piece that told her story without words. It started simply, hesitantly, like her early days of rediscovering the piano. Then it grew in complexity and confidence, with moments of tension and resolution that reflected the challenges and triumphs of the past months. The final section was joyful and expansive, full of possibility and hope. When the last note faded, there was a moment of silence before the room erupted in applause. Rose saw Tina wiping tears from her eyes in the front row. Mr. Chen was nodding with obvious pride. Rose played for nearly 40 minutes, a carefully selected program that showcased her growing technical skills and emotional range as a pianist. She included classical pieces she had studied intensively over the past months, popular songs reimagined for piano, and 2 more of her original compositions. For her final piece, she played the same song she had performed at the gala 6 months earlier, but now with greater skill and confidence, a marker of how far she had come. The standing ovation that followed warmed her heart, but it wasn't the applause that mattered most to Rose anymore. It was the feeling of being exactly where she was meant to be, doing what she was born to do. After her performance, Howard took the stage again to make the evening's big announcement, a new initiative to provide instruments, lessons and performance opportunities to 50 underprivileged children across the city. Rose would be involved as both teacher and mentor, helping young musicians who reminded her of herself. The fundraising that followed was record-breaking. Donors opened their checkbooks generously, inspired by both the mission and Rose's living example of how music could change a life. Later, as the formal part of the evening wound down and guests mingled with cocktails, Rose found herself surrounded by well-wishers and supporters. Richard Landry from the community music school proudly introduced her to potential donors as our star teacher. Lin Chen reported that piano sales at her shop had increased 30% since Rose began playing there twice weekly. All these people, Tina marveled, appearing at Rose's side with a glass of champagne. They all know you. They all admire you. Rose smiled, still adjusting to this new reality. Sometimes I can hardly believe it myself. Believe it, said a new voice. Rose turned to find Victor Novak approaching with a tall, distinguished woman she didn't recognize. Rose, I'd like you to meet Sophia Reyes, the artistic director of the City Symphony Orchestra. Rose's eyes widened as she shook the woman's hand. The City Symphony was the most prestigious classical music institution in the region. Mr. Novak has been singing your praises, Sophia said with a warm smile. We're putting together a special concert series for next season, New Voices in Classical Music. We feature emerging talents performing alongside our orchestra. I'd like you to consider being part of it. Rose felt her heart skip. I'd be honored, but I'm not sure I'm qualified. I've only been performing professionally for 6 months. It's not about how long you've been performing, Sophia replied. It's about your connection to the music, your ability to move an audience. I heard both in your playing tonight. They exchanged information, promising to meet soon to discuss details. As Sophia moved away to greet other guests, Victor squeezed Rose's shoulder. This is just the beginning, he said quietly. Later that night, after most guests had departed, Rose found herself drawn back to the piano. The ballroom was nearly empty now, just staff clearing tables and breaking down decorations. Some of them were former co-workers who waved to her with friendly smiles. No resentment in their greeting, just genuine happiness for her success. Rose sat at the piano one more time, not to perform, but simply to enjoy the quiet moment. She played softly, a gentle melody that had been forming in her mind throughout the evening. Howard and Elaine Bennett appeared beside the piano, coats on, ready to leave. That's lovely, Elaine commented. Another original piece? Rose nodded. Just something I'm working on. We wanted to thank you before we left, Howard said. Tonight was our most successful fundraiser ever. I should be thanking you, Rose replied earnestly. For everything. That night 6 months ago changed my life. No, Howard corrected gently. You changed your life, Rose. We just opened a door. You're the one who was brave enough to walk through it. After they left, Rose continued playing softly, losing track of time as she explored the new melody. She was so absorbed that she didn't notice Mr. Peterson, the hotel manager, approaching until he was standing beside the piano. The staff tells me you still visit the employee lounge sometimes, he remarked. Bring coffee and donuts for the morning shift. Rose smiled sheepishly. Old habits. They were my family for 3 years. Mr. Peterson nodded. They miss you. Though they're awfully proud to say they used to work with you. He hesitated, then added, I am too. His unexpected admission touched her. Mr. Peterson had never been one for sentimentality. Thank you, she said simply. He cleared his throat. Well, I'll leave you to it. Just wanted to say the piano is always here if you need to practice. Day or night. You have a standing invitation. After he walked away, Rose played for a few minutes more, savoring the feel of the keys beneath her fingers, the rich sound of the grand piano in the now empty ballroom. This was where it had all begun, with a tired waitress stealing a moment to play when no one was watching. Now everyone was watching. Now she played not just for herself but for audiences, for students, for the pure joy of sharing music with others. Now she was creating her own compositions, building a career she had never dared to dream about. Rose played the final notes of her new melody, letting them hang in the air of the silent ballroom. Then she closed the piano gently, rose from the bench and walked toward the exit, no longer a stranger to this world of music and possibility, but someone who finally, truly, belonged.